Good day, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to our fireside chat discussion on digital technologies in mining. My name is Edward Bardo, and I'm the Director of Mining and Metals here at Aspen Technology. And today we're going to have, I think, a wonderful fireside chat that I think everybody will find interesting. The use of digital technology nowadays is prevalent in our daily lives and surrounds us with capability and risks that we could never have imagined a few years ago. This technology is also finding its ways into many industries, including mining, the mining environment. Though advanced digital technologies have found their way into mining, in many cases, there have been big challenges and resistance to change that this brings. Today, we will talk with two leading mining experts who will discuss how digital will change the mining world and give us insight into what can be done to address the challenges along the way. With that in mind, I'd like to introduce our two speakers today. We'll start with Wesley. Wesley, would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, thanks very much, Ed. Good to be here. Obviously, my name is Wesley Tucker, so I'm the head of digital transformation for the DBS group of companies, which is obviously a diamond mining company with a somewhat further integrated value chain down in the downstream as well. But my background is I'm an electrical engineer by trade, and I've been in the mining industry my whole life, working predominantly across Africa and in Australia. It's really good to be here. Thanks, Ed.
Well, thank you very much, Wesley. It's good to have you. Jeanette, we have Dr. Jeanette Mcgill. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Ed, as well as thank you, Wes, for joining today. I'm looking forward to the conversation. And as Ed said, I am Jeanette Mcgill. I am the Vice President and General Manager responsible for metals and mining for Aspen Technology. And similar to Wes, my entire career does come through the global mining sector. I started in production. I'm an economic geologist as well, and worked in a lot of technology aspects, and really enjoy growing businesses inside of major corporations. And that's exactly what we're busy doing at Aspen Tech. Thanks, Ed.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Mcgill. I think it will be both of your insights are going to be very interesting to folks as we tackle some of these challenging questions. So let's start right away. So first of all, a big question. How do you see digitalization impacting our industry in terms of people, processes, and products? Everybody knows and hears this general term about digitalization in mining, but how do you see the impacts? What do you see are some of the big rubber meets the road changes people are going to see? Let's start with you, Wesley.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I think it's a perfect place to start, and obviously picking up on the people point. I think it's absolutely fascinating if you think about the sort of journey we've been on in mining with the sort of advent of the fourth industrial revolution. One of the things that companies, I guess, are facing everywhere is the expectation of our people for digital technologies. And it's that digital native concept that comes from our personal lives. We have hyper personalization. We have access to what we need. We have incredible digital experiences that companies are launching, and they are ever evolving in our personal lives. And sometimes I feel like we then step into our enterprises and into our companies, and everything kind of slows down a little bit. And we expect that same level of hyper-personalization and that same level of interaction and experience with the digital products that we build. And that's not always the case in some of the things that we do. And I guess if we take that expectation of our people as the challenge and we meet it, that has obviously the added impact of then impacting the process. And so technology is excellent and it's great, and there's a huge amount of opportunity that we have in our industry to apply those technologies. But unless we truly understand the needs of our people and how we need to deploy those digital products to be able to impact the way in which they work, we're really going to struggle in that sense. But it's not to say that the opportunity isn't fundamental, and I think if we can get it right and we can match the personal hyper-personalization experience that we have in our personal lives within the complicated environment that is mining, I think there's a huge amount of value that we can unlock.
Thank you very much, Wes. I think you picked on a very important subject there, talking about people in that equation. Dr. Mcgill, how would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think the personalization is a key part of this, but what I would like to contribute as well is it's around looking at this as an entire system. So the interconnectedness that actually functions in the mining operations between people, process, and technology. As Wes already said, the technology is it's a known, it's something which has been well represented, but how does this technology impact the processes that are currently under play in the mines. And then often these digitalization programs become a change management strategy and a change management exercise. And so the real important takeaway here is that technology can't be deployed and implemented in isolation. We have to consider this trifecta around the people and the process, but holistically together, as well as just discrete elements together.
Yeah, I think many folks that are listening here will really like to hear that particular aspect of engaging all aspects of that trifecta as you spoke about. I guess another question that kind of leads into is how do you see specifically, how do you think global initiatives like sustainability will impact the sustainability impact and so forth will be impacted by digitalization? We know this is a concern for society in general, but very specifically in mining, how do you see digitalization impacting that, the sustainability initiatives they have? Let's start with you, Wes.
Yeah, thanks, Ed. I mean, it's really top of mind. COP26 that's just happened here in the UK. You look at all the sort of protests around the world and the way in which consumers are kind of looking to sustainability to drive their decisions and their purchasing power, the energy transition, all of these good things. I mean, I think it's absolutely topical, and digital has a massive part to play. I guess very close to home for us in De Beers is our Tracer platform, which is a distributed blockchain platform that's looking to track and trace our diamonds, but therefore to provide a sort of a degree of visibility to consumers around what is the impact of diamonds and what are they doing. These types of technologies, I think, are going to be fundamental in the future as consumers become more and more, I guess, aware and more interested in where their products are coming from. You know, what is the impact of those products? How they're made? How are they ethically sourced, etc., etc., etc. And I think we've had a huge amount of learning around the importance of digital technologies to be able to bring those stories to life. It's one of the areas which I think is going to be a massive theme going forward in the next few years. And then obviously, if we look at the way in which we're deploying digital technologies in our business, there's a huge amount of value to add in using the data and using the insights to find the areas where we can make improvements in sustainability. There's a lot of good that we can do, and there's a lot of an impact that we can make. And I do think that if we get it right, if we sort of get that diverse data set, draw true insights from it, the decisions we can make as leadership around the way in which we make sustainability decisions is going to be a huge game changer for us as an industry.
I think that's a great answer, and I think that nowadays when you talk about where people get their goods from, I think now in today's environment, everybody's a bit more sensitive to supply chain and where things are coming from than they might have been in the past. And so I think the data-driven approach towards sustainability and being able to establish baselines is critical. Dr. Mcgill, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, what you gentlemen have just said is particularly key, and what we see it as is actually a dual challenge. You've spoken around the criticality of the supply chain, the importance of the data, and we phrase this the dual challenge, and it's about being able to work effectively in these operating environments and still, of course, provide the production data, being able to present the shareholder growth and wealth. But at the same time, it's all very well that you have these production efficiencies, which are being derived from the overall global demand and the continued demand for metals, as we see through the various green economy initiatives, because that's not going to reduce any metals demand. But the real dual challenge is about how do we keep up these global efficiencies within a sustainable context. And that really talks then back to the ongoing COP conversations and how do we as industry practitioners in the metals and mining sector ensure that this dual challenge just rises to the fore and we can be, competent role players in this environmental space, but at the same time live up to the dual challenge of ensuring production efficiencies as well.
So I think that with that in mind, I think it's a great thing to think about for everyone that in this discussion of digital technologies, this idea of sustainability shows a different way of thinking. Often a lot of folks are thinking of digital technologies as potentially technologies that might replace people, might move people out of their jobs, might do these things. But as you're saying is that sustainability is one of the things that's essential to use this type of technology to help promote and to enable. So when a lot of organizations, of course, when they're trying, as I kind of introduced there at the beginning, they see certain challenges or they face certain roadblocks as they're trying to move forward into their digital or technological initiatives. What are your thoughts on how organizations can be successful in adding or adopting new digital technologies and using them for such initiatives as sustainability or just rubber meets the road actions like safety and operational efficiency? Dr. McGill, would you like to start on that one?
Thanks, Ed. And for me here, it's really around the organization's willingness to adopt these strategies. We've seen that it really involves an appetite and a willingness to change. And yes, previously there were some various hurdles to entry around digitization, and we're seeing a lot of those barriers being reduced. Even this fireside chat is occurring virtually on various different continents, and we can just see how a range of autonomous and remote opportunities are really working to serve the mining space. But at the end of the day, it does talk to overall appetite and buy-in. And, what I've seen in various of the areas that I've worked is around this buy-in can come in two ways. What we look at really is that there needs to be a top-down approach with this, where, the executive managers do have a defined strategy, and it's around then being able to have a top-down approach to build and encourage the adoption of these technologies on the individual sites. But that's not going to succeed on its own. What's also required is a bottom-up approach where the adopters on site-specific ranges of technologies are willing to grab hold of, adopt them, also drive some of the changes. So oftentimes the best ideation around technology changes and processes that should take place occur effectively, in the production sites. And so programs that enhance ideation from a range of people that can be looked at and observed are highly important. So really around being able to have successful adoption to these programs involves the bottom-up approach, being able to take production initiatives upwards around pushing it up the value chain, as it were, as well as then a top-down approach where strategy can also drive the insertion of digitalization technologies into the production sites.
And so it touches everybody from the top down, bottoms up. And so if we address it across the board, then you have the best chance for success. Do you see any specific challenges with getting those two to meet?
Yeah, some of the challenges would really be around what I spoke to in that trifecta, of course. The technology is the one aspect, but the challenges do talk to around the process. What types of the business processes is the technology changing and adapting? And then, of course, as we know, as everybody doesn't like change. So how do we deal with the people aspect of deploying these systems, be it top down or bottom up? So we've got to then really look at how it impacts the processes on the sites, as well as how the people are feeling impacted. At the end of the day, it's about being able to strive for this optimal balance as we deploy technologies.
Thank you very much for that. Wesley, what are your thoughts on that important question?
Yeah, no, thanks, Ed. And I can't agree more. And I guess when you talk about that top-down strategy, the only thing I would add to that is this concept of digital strategy is not different. It's not something that lives on its own. Digital strategy is the business strategy, and I guess the business strategy is the sustainability strategy. It all must interlink with each other, or it's not really going to kind of play together. And I guess driving that consistent strategy across those three sort of horizons and those three themes, I think really sets an organization up for success. But I completely agree, Dr. McGill, that top down is a critical part of it. But it's really when if you think about the mining operation, it's impacting and helping the person who turns the spanner at the end of the day to make the difference. Otherwise, we're not really going to make much of an impact. And so it's quite critical, as you say, that we make sure that we impact that change and we make it successful to the people that are working. I think that there's a piece there around organizational design for your digital execution function that's quite critical. The challenge with anything different, the challenge with innovation, is it does require a little bit of space to flourish, a little bit of space to to come into its own. And really the challenge that we've seen is if you put that function a little bit too far away from our core business, it loses the empathy and it loses the understanding. And invariably it floats off too far to the side and it generally is not successful. And then I guess you've got the reverse risk of if you bring it too close and it's too close to the core operation, it it has the risk of becoming a little bit too BAU, and it doesn't have that fundamental shift, the change that we're looking for in our industry, the step change. And I guess, there is no silver bullet here. There is no memo of an answer, because every organization is a little bit different, and every group of people is a little bit different. But it's about sort of being intentional about where you set it up, how you approach it. And then I guess once being intentional, don't be afraid to reassess it and go, where are we relative to where we want to be in that paradigm? And as you say, if you're too far away from the core of the business, you will lose out on the business strategy. You won't be aligned to the pure, sort of purpose and reason of the enterprise and the organization. But if you're too close, you're probably going to find yourselves falling back into the old methodology of not being able to adopt the new and I guess different ways of working and technologies that can help you. So I think it's quite a critical thing that we're a little bit honest with ourselves about the challenge in the organizational design, and that it's okay to kind of relook at it every now and then and sort of, mark yourselves and say, well, how well have we done with the setup? And it's okay to shift that, move it in maybe a bit closer, a bit further away from the core of the business that you're trying to impact.
I think that's an excellent points there. That really, I was recently speaking with folks about this, and a lot of the CIOs of several mining companies were bringing up this point of trying to separate out and describe all of these different activities, big activities they wanted to do, and very quickly they kind of separated themselves from the rest of the core of what the company wanted to accomplish, and it started to become a bit more distant. So it was a very interesting thing to see. I think that they were working very hard for some reason to make the digital strategy separate from what the business strategy was, without making the two one and the same. So now I've got a little challenge for you. Imagine I'm a new mining company here. I'm a mining company that's been around. I've worked some traditional old ways, trying to do what we've done for many, many years. We've been productive. We've been successful. So now I get this real pressure. I'm getting this pressure to start pushing to use new digital technologies. So, been resistant as a lot may have been, but perhaps you can help me. I need to understand something. What advice or recommendation do you have for me and one of these folks that maybe is a bit more resistant to change, or maybe a bit skeptical of change? What type of advice or recommendations would you give to that type of mining organization who might be taking those first steps? And how can they, or if they're past just those first steps, what might we do to get continuing momentum along that digitalization journey? So what are your thoughts on that? Let's start with you again, Wesley.
Yeah, no, thanks, Ed. I'd be interested to meet the company that hasn't already done something in this space, tried something in digital, tried some technology implementation. And the adage I always have is, we as mining companies, we've got no shortage of data. We've got data for decades that we've been sitting on, a huge amount of that. So there are companies that are already doing things. Some are maybe trying in a similar sort of vein. Some are trying new things, etc. But I think fundamentally, and we've actually touched on pieces of it the whole way through this discussion. It's around, it's really around the impact that we're going to make on our people, and the changes that are going to be there. And for me, the area where companies generally seem to get stuck is in this this kind of I'm trying to think of the right way to describe it, but this kind of POC nightmare, if you will, this kind of stuck in a POC zone of we're constantly testing things, we're constantly trying things. As Dr. Mcgill mentioned earlier, we know that the technology works. We've got lots of proof cases that show you that the technology's come a very long way in 10 years. And I guess as a company, we've got to make sure that we're very, very, very clear on the value we're trying to create, the reason for what we're trying to do. And then we really need to build things with, at its heart, the ability to scale across our organization. And that's not just building it technically in a way that can scale, whether that's, down the value chain, across the value chain, or it's across the operation, something that can be used in lots of different areas. But it's also something that can scale in terms of the way our people work. And the better, if we from the beginning, we link it into the way our people work from the outset, it makes it a lot easier for that change management, a lot easier for the technology to take root in the organization, because it's inherently built in the way our people work, and it's supporting them in the way they need to do their jobs. And if you think about it like that, and you think about it purely in I'm setting out to scale, I think you're not going to get stuck in this. I'm going to run a POC here and a POC there and a pilot there and a pilot there. That's not the right mindset to set out in the technology. And if you do need to prove a concept, be very clear on what concept it is you're proving. Are you proving that cloud computing works, or that the data can be pulled from the site, or that you can impact a process or make a change? then that's okay if you're not comfortable that could work. But I suspect most of the time when we're looking at whatever the use case may be, if we're honest about the value, I don't think we have any doubts about the fact that this thing can move from a pilot or something small into something that's going to be much larger. And I feel like we use the POC label as a way of going, I don't have to be honest about the value. I can just go and test something, and I don't have to think about the future too much because I'm just playing around right now. Don't come to me and put too much pressure on what we're doing. And I think, irrespective of the size of the organization, you can probably find a place in your business that you can make a meaningful impact. And again, whether that's in sustainability or it's direct value through process efficiencies, there are definitely technologies and there's definitely processes you can apply it to that can be scaled to bring that into your normal way of working, business as usual. But you have to set out with that in mind. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck in this a POC peril. I think is the best way of putting it. That a lot of companies find themselves in.
I think that's a great point. And one of the terms, I never liked this idea, particularly from being on the side of where you're the one who's helping provide the technology, this idea of proof of concept. This idea of proof suggests you're in an adversarial relationship where you actually have to prove something. In many cases, though, we all know how it is in mining, is that every mine feels that they're unique. It's not a matter of whether or not cloud computing works. It's a matter of whether or not, does cloud computing work in the deserts in Namibia? In my mine, my specific mine. And so I know there's a lot of concern that will that technology work in my specific location, to take advantage of the technologies that exist that have been tried and proven and move forward. Dr. Mcgill, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so thank you. And this conversation is a highly important one because I do think the adoption of digitalization and various technologies is key, as a lot of the mid-tier operators are naturally battling with the exact viewpoint that you set out as the challenge in this question around, how does one have this conversation with various people that might be a bit reluctant to pull technology across. And, Wes has been exactly on point around the fact that things need to be scalable. But I probably do, my first point of two is around stressing that the option to start small is a very important one. I think that we talk around being able to deploy in bite-sized pieces and, being able to test a few things on a few agents does allow some of that buy-in and being able to check people and process. So it is about being able to start small and then being able to scale throughout the organization, because that does build trust. So it's always a case of what can I do for you in the smallest metric possible. But I think, the advice that I like to give people as well, there's a lot of perception in a name, right? And so I hear you guys talking around POCs, but from my perspective, what I actually prefer to call them are pre-production deployments, because I think a POC, as you've already alluded to, sort of in one's mind eye, it's a test, it's a trial, it's effectively a sandbox exercise. And sandbox exercises for small operators are really hard to manage because you've got really real production challenges that you have to agree to and adhere to at the same time as testing technologies. But if you are having a pre-production deployment, the intention is always there that it's going to be part of production. All that you're doing is you're inserting something just prior to that phase, being able to test it, being able to acknowledge the impact that it's going to make on people and process in your specific environment, and then being able to scale up. So I think my advice really around technology adoption is to forego the sandbox, come in with a pre-production deployment, start on the least number of assets possibly, and then scale from there would be my advice.
I think a lot of folks, yeah, I really do too. I think a lot of folks are shaking their head. Yes, that's probably a good way to go. I think it really starts to start them with the right momentum too to succeed. They just jump right in with both feet. It's a dedication to success that you don't need to be proved. You're not adversarial to the whole concept of technology, that you want to embrace it and move forward. So I think that's wonderful. Well, this is a fantastic discussion, and I know we could go on for some time, but I want to thank you, Dr. Jeanette Mcgill and Wesley Tucker, for the wonderful insight that you've given us today. And I think the folks who are watching this will be very appreciative of the type of advice and information that you've shared with us today. So just to kind of wrap up and close this out, I wanted to thank everybody again for joining us on this fireside chat. And I want to end by saying, there's a saying, The only thing you can count on in the future is change. Change comes whether you like it or not, it will be there. As a mining organization, are you prepared to address change and move forward into the mine of the future? So remember, this isn't a journey you take alone. This is a journey that others are fully willing to join you on and help you. Part of the reason why we're having this discussion right now. So please reach out, do what it is you need to do, and get the help that you need, but take that journey. I want to thank you very much for joining us today, and have a good day.